Holy, why does he get to do that? And his fans still think he is like the GOAT and loves America. Republicans can literally advocate for universal health care if they wanted to, and people will be like, yeah, that's great. Did you see Trump call Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator? Yeah. I mean, look. If Zelensky was even closer to Vladimir Putin, perhaps Trump would respect him more, okay? Like, not to come across too libbed up here. You guys already know what my perspective is. It's far too nuanced for liberals to ever associate it with like any sort of progress. They immediately assume that I'm like pro-Putin. But having said that, you know, Trump does like dictators. So obviously if Zelensky was more of a dictator, if he was a real one, okay, Trump would probably like him. Ukraine probably would have at least some of its natural resources back. You know what I mean? Trump will be like, okay, I like you. Zelensky responds as President Trump suggests Ukraine started war with Russia. I do think that there is so much honesty in the way that Trump operates. And the honesty is, we're awful allies, okay? We're just not good. We're not good allies. When Ronald Reagan said the scariest words in the American language is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, it actually applies specifically to foreign nations, okay? If you're a foreign country, if you're a militant group, and someone with aviator glasses shows up at your doorstep and says, hey, I'm from the United States government and I'm here to help you, just know you're cooked, okay? Maybe in the interim, you're fine. You will be able to really stick it to your adversaries, okay? But this is the new HasanAbi nuke doctrine. Remember when I talked about the nuke doctrine? This is my other doctrine, okay? HasanAbi doctrine 2. If a defense contractor looking dude wearing cargo pants, okay, shows up at your doorstep with aviator shades on and says, I'm here from the United States government and I'm here to help. We are going to give you all the weapons and all the training you want. Run away. Disband your group, drop everything, and go make sure that you don't do the thing that they want you to do, okay? You might be a socialist. You might be a revolutionary Marxist-Leninist vanguard party. If the CIA knocks on your door and says, hey, you want help? I'd be like, nah, I'm good. Thank you. I would never want that. Hassan pulling an AOC is going to be investigated by the DOJ? Yeah. Because guess what's going to happen? Okay? A lot of death and a lot of destruction. Guess what's going to happen? They're going to give you weapons and they're going to train your troops and they're going to use you like a napkin. You're going to be discarded like a tenga outside of a Japanese love hotel. Okay? That is what's going to inevitably happen to you. They're going to do a pump and dump. We've done the pumping, and now on the side of Ukraine, we are on the side of dumping. Let's take a look.
The Kremlin says that President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin could meet in person before the end of next week. The two countries are holding high-level talks over the war in Ukraine. And yesterday, Donald Trump seemed to blame Ukraine's president for the war that Russia started. MTS Taib has more.
From a gilded room at his Florida resort, President Trump hit back at concern from Ukraine over not being invited to the U.S.-Russia peace talks in Saudi Arabia.
And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
That's ridiculous. That is a ridiculous statement. It is not. It is the furthest from the truth. Okay? It's definitely victim blaming. It's, you know, Ukraine, you started this war by what? Looking like a snack? Is that what it is? You just looked too submissive and breedable. You looked too much. Ukraine, you looked too flat. Your lands were too flat. Yeah, you just looked so your eastern your eastern territory looked far too annexable. You know? It is what it is.
Kind of nice that I'm here just a few days before the third anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Also in Kyiv this morning was Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who had this to say. We are seeing a lot of disinformation that is coming from Russia, he said. Unfortunately, President Trump, with all due respect, is living in this disinformation space.
President Trump.
Yeah, all due respect. Donald Trump also hit this. Hold on. Think of it. A modestly successful comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won, that never had to start, but a war that he, without the U.S. and Trump, will never be able to settle. The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed. I'm not going to do the accent. It's too long. While the United States will get nothing back. Why didn't Sleepy Joe Biden demand equalization? Now, the one part about this is that the United States money is guaranteed. Why will or Europe's money is guaranteed? The U.S.'s money is not. Is a really silly thing, because you see, the way things work in the United States of America is not that we get money back in the form of in any sort of like money back for the government. We make those people spend the money that we send them on American weapons. It's that beautiful public-private partnership that I talk about quite frequently. That's kind of what this is. So, yeah, it's not necessarily coming back to government coffers. It's just directly funding the military-industrial complex. We first fund the military-industrial complex with, obviously, taxpayer dollars, so they can do that R&D. They can do they can find the most lethal, the most lethal version of the equipment that we have. And then once that equipment gets old, okay, we need to dump it off somewhere. So Ukraine looks great. We can just like send it to them. So we send them money, okay? And then that money then gets recycled back into the military industrial complex because they're purchasing our weapons with that money. Basically, what I'm saying is, in every aspect of the federal government, the government never actually works as a quote unquote business. It just works as a placeholder for funds that you can give to corporations, both on the production side, but then also simultaneously on the purchasing side, and then also simultaneously when our allies purchase it as well. That's just kind of how it works. So, of course, Ukraine wasn't giving the American government any money. It was just giving American corporations money. Anyway, what was that blast off meme? How dare you? I'm sorry. You said those words, and they are now a part of the literary history. So it is what it is, you know? I saw the current unfolding events 3 years ago. It's so sad that time and time again, countries agree to be U.S. pawns, only be thrown under the bus as they always are. Yes, it's going to be in the Library of Congress forever. Aliens would probably find it in our nuke tomb world one day. Yes, they won't understand it though. RFK has mentioned the exact same thing you just mentioned. Yeah, ask RFK how he thinks about that when it comes to our allegiance to Israel though, and you will understand that he is not an honest broker. Okay. Anyway, let's continue. So. Is Donald Trump a little heavy-handed? Yeah, he's out of his mind in the way that he talks about Ukraine. And I think there are two different factors here at play. I think one of the factors is that he obviously likes Vladimir Putin. He likes, authoritarian strongmen. That much is clear. He literally likes Xi Jinping. I don't even think that's a bad thing, but he likes him, He's terrified of the Chinese menace, but he does personally like Xi Jinping. He's like, he's a strong guy. He runs the country. He runs a tight ship, right? And the same goes for Vladimir Putin. And he's also very malleable, very persuadable by people who will flatter him, okay? So I think that part of the reason why he's really hamming up this Ukraine stuff and really attacking Ukraine in the most Trumpian ways possible, by basically lying about Ukraine's involvement or claiming that Ukraine brought this about on their own with no American involvement whatsoever, by the way. That's the grossest part about this, That's the grossest aspect of this is just like, imagine being America and goading Ukraine over and over again and being like, see, yeah, we'll give you weapons. We'll give you permanent defense. Don't worry. Maybe we'll even let you in the NATO. And then turning around and being like, you guys suck. You're the reason why you got invaded. You actually were looking submissive and breedable. It's your fault. Also, your leadership is ass. He is a comedian and a shitty one at that. Like, that's crazy. I mean, that is U.S. foreign policy to a T, but you're not supposed to openly say it like this. You know what I mean? It's because Ukraine represents democracy. Okay, I wouldn't go that far. All right, calm down. I mean, okay. Let's relax a bit. Okay, let's dial it back. Anyway, having said that, if you want to know if you want to know what I think, what my assumption is here, like, I think he loves Vladimir Putin. He, like, unironically thinks Vladimir Putin is a cool guy. And I think this is Putin's doing for the most part. I think Putin is, like, basically telling him, like, Ukraine can't be a part of the talks, because Ukraine coming into the talks is symbolic. Okay? Like, Ukraine doesn't really have a say in what happens in Ukraine, ironically enough. But optically, you're not supposed to completely cut them out of the equation. Okay? That's ridiculous. You're not supposed to cut the European counterparts out of the equation optically either, you know, even though they also don't necessarily have a real say in this process. But the fact that Trump did that is, I think, a W for Vladimir Putin. And I think he's doing that for Putin specifically. The other side of it is that Trump is a petty bitch, and I think maybe he just hates Ukraine for not giving him blackmail against Joe Biden, which caused him to lose the election. Like, in his mind, he probably thinks, like, if Ukraine gave me blackmail and you know, fake nonsense about, like, Hunter Biden and his involvement with Burisma and how it actually was directly connected to Joe Biden, then that would have caused him to win the election. It would have been a bombshell. And that is something that they didn't do for him, and then it led to him getting impeached, the perfect phone call, if you remember. And I think that also plays a role. Would he care, though? He won anyway? Yes, he absolutely would care. He's a petty ass. What are you talking about? He got impeached. Like, he's embarrassed by that for sure. So I think that also plays a role in him, like, going heavy-handed against Ukraine. Because none of this makes sense. It's both ahistorical in its approach to what has taken place, from Trump saying that, you know, Ukraine is responsible for being invaded. That's a ridiculous statement, okay? If we are going to talk about, like, outside influences, or, like, what also might have played somewhat of a role in Russia engaging in this insane act of invading Ukraine, America would be more responsible than Ukraine, okay? It's ridiculous. You're a dumbass for saying this, and you're a horrible monster, but everybody knows that. So yeah, like, Ukraine is not responsible for being invaded. All right, I can't believe I keep saying this very obvious thing that seemingly is not so obvious. No, saying Euromaidan or anything like that, that's ridiculous, okay? You are ridiculous if you think that Ukraine itself is responsible for Russia invading Ukraine. You're ridiculous. At most, you should recognize that it is American and Western influence that gave Ukraine the bandwidth to be able to operate in a more militant capacity, if you want to say that. Anyway, bro, I'm losing IQ watching these stream. Question mark, Arab money. Let's continue with this insane rambling. Why didn't Sleepy Joe Biden demand equalization, in that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us? We have a big, beautiful ocean of separation. On top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money we sent him is missing. He refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls, and the only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle. A dictator without elections, Zelensky better move fast, or he is not going to have a country left. In the meantime, we are successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something all admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden never tried, Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered and millions have unnecessarily died. And so it continues. Zelensky isn't a good person, point blank. Yeah, I don't care. Like, what do you mean? Okay, sure. But what are we talking about here in terms of Donald Trump saying Zelensky is running a gravy train? Like, no, I don't think Zelensky wanted Russia to invade Ukraine. Okay. I don't think Zelensky is all that responsible for Russia invading Ukraine. I think that's ridiculous to state. I think this is an abdication of a lot of American responsibility from the equation. We did it. Okay. Russia did it, number one, first and foremost. Okay. And then we took advantage of the situation. We goaded them, and then we took advantage of the situation, and we made out like bandits. And Donald Trump is now turning around and being like, yeah, it was your fault all along. It's bullshit, okay? And the faster people understand that reality, the better things will be. I think if you're Zelensky, it's infinitely better for you not to be invaded by Russia as you pick apart, make some contracts, offer some of these state sectors to foreign capital without being invaded by Russia. People are not dying. You get to make a pretty penny on the side, offshore a bunch of the ill-gotten gains, and you're fine. You're good. You're in a much better position overall than constantly in fear that you might be assassinated by a far-right nationalist inside of the country, or assassinated by Volodymyr Putin, or a drone strike. You know what I mean? Zelensky very famously, the day before the invasion, said that he didn't believe Russia would invade Ukraine. I feel like if he wanted the invasion, he would have been way more hawkish. But hey, what do I know? I know. But make no mistake, okay? That would allow you to forget that I'm responsible for Russia invading Ukraine in the minds of many people online who've been brain broken by understanding the world from the perspective of online commentary, the online commentariat. J.D. Vance warns Zelensky he will regret bad-mouthing Trump and condemns his atrocious response to the peace talks. Yeah, after I urged Russia to invade Ukraine, and Vladimir Putin, being a big HasanAbi, had listened to what I had to say, I also urged every one of my followers to vote for Donald Trump instead of Kamala Harris. And of course, I'm the kingmaker here. Here's the White House posting, congestion pricing is dead. Manhattan and all of New York is saved. Long live the king. God, we're so corny. We are such a corny country. God, we suck. The only thing I don't get in your point is, what was the alternative? Not take the U.S. military aid, let Russia take Ukraine region by region like they did in 2014. In terms of what Ukraine could have done, I don't think that there is anything Ukraine could have done. Ukraine is just stuck between two powers. Ukraine is stuck between a regional power that wants either complete control, complete annexation, or at least like a very significant amount of control over its internal affairs, Russia, okay? And stuck between Western interests as well that wants the very same. So there's not really much Ukraine could have done to fix that situation. I don't think that there is like any sort of brave and bold thing you can do. At that point, you're just making a decision between like who is going to you over and steal your natural resources in a way that is like not as bad, I guess. They were always cooked. They were perma-cooked from the jump. Shut up, subtard. Why are Elon? No, don't ban that person. Don't ban that person. Unban that person. I want to understand the mindset of the new Elon Musk supporters that say subtard now. Like, I want to know what that even means. I don't fully get it. What is this place? Look, it doesn't really matter all too much, but this is a very obvious "I told you so" moment. And I hope that liberals were confused about what's going on right now because they thought that like Ukraine was really winning the war and doing their very best or whatever the fuck, will recognize that this was slated to happen inevitably, whether it was going to happen later down the line, where there would be a negotiated extraction of natural resources that made everybody feel like Ukraine was also a part of the bargain in a more hush-hush style way, in a more covert way, or whether it would happen in this bouldering, bumbling buffoon style way that Donald Trump likes to delegate, likes to likes to control the situation, it ultimately doesn't change the reality for Ukraine. Here's OSINT Defender. This might be the most brain-dead statement I've ever seen be made by a sitting U.S. president. Well, don't worry. Donald Trump will shock you. He will come out with even more brain-dead statements, probably even today or maybe tomorrow. Who's to say? Calling Zelensky a dictator while someone like Putin has been in power for now 25 years, some next level stupidity. This is the president of the United States on one of his official accounts spouting Russian propaganda and straight up lying about the situation in Ukraine. Yeah, wow, it's shocking. American presidents never actively lie about foreign policy. Anyway, let's get back to Trump calls Zelensky a dictator as he hits back at disinformation criticism.
In the last few moments has slammed Ukraine's President Zelensky as a dictator without elections. In the past few minutes, he has posted this on his Truth Social platform. Let me just take you through some of the detail. Quite a lengthy post, as you can see there. He says that President
Don't act like this is comparable to previous American hegemony. This is basically America saying, "F you all, we're conquering the world." No. America has always had a "F you all, we're conquering the world" approach. The only difference is they at least had the decency to lie about it. They had the decency to make it seemingly more covert. What do you mean? What point in time has America not conquered the world? Yeah, they're saying the quiet part out loud, which I do think will have repercussions, mind you. Like, I definitely think that this will have negative repercussions. Saying the quiet part out loud basically makes it impossible for the rest of the globe to look at the situation and go, okay, maybe they're still the world police and it's good, okay? No, they're saying it's in your face, we're doing it. And it's interesting that they're saying we're doing it and it's in your face. No more diplomacy, no more soft power initiatives, no more covertly stealing resources, no more debt trappings. We're just going to come in and we're just going to take it. It's basically one step removed from old school colonial shit. Okay? Western superpowers used to just come in and be like, you're going to do trade whether you like it or not. And the people would be like, we don't want to do it. And they'd be like, we're going to kill you. Okay? And then through that process, they would dominate the colonies and inevitably, slowly but surely, by way of like the religious apparatus and whatnot, overtake these other countries, whether they were a regional power on their own or whether they were not as developed as the Western world was at the time. We did that in perpetuity. And in that process, we would kill a bunch of people. We would enslave a bunch of people. Okay? It was really bad. And then the world became more advanced. The world powers decided, oh, let's do the same thing, but also make it seem a little bit better, make it seem a little bit more modernized and more decent and more moral. So what do? They engaged in imperialism. Instead of directly going, and they still did direct boots on the ground military warfare and things like that, but they decided to do things in a more covert fashion through espionage, through soft power initiatives, through diplomacy, through security contracts. They also engaged in destabilization and complete control over lendership agreements, over loans, over institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, where they would implement austerity regimes upon nations in the global south. Donald Trump recognizes that America's position as the top cop and the superpower, the hegemonic superpower, is waning. Donald Trump recognizes that reality and has decided that instead of holding on to the old hat ways of doing things, instead of holding on to like this notion that America is actually ultimately a force for good, okay, has decided to say the quiet part out loud, possibly because he's not very intelligent, I don't know, or possibly because he recognizes that there's not really a lot of counters that there's not really anything you can do against America if it chooses to do something. So, in that process, he's going back to an older way of doing things. Maybe not directly invading countries and dominating them and genociding them, still utilizing proxies for the most part, but openly stating what our desires are. An extraction of natural resources, a complete dismantling of the federal apparatus, and taking advantage of the economic instability in the country that we are using as a proxy to, force them to sell all of their state enterprise for pennies on the dollar to Western capital. This rhetoric has already damaged things noticeably. EU and US relations are worse than ever, and it's only going to get worse when Russia-aligned right-wing parties start to get in power. Yeah, I don't see how burning bridges with NATO and Western allies would benefit America, though. I don't think they're going to necessarily burn bridges with NATO, because NATO is our extortion racket, okay? It's a protection racket. We utilize NATO in a way that benefits the military-industrial complex. NATO is America, and America is NATO. That is why I've stated time and time again that I would be shocked if Donald Trump actively and actually dismantled NATO. If Donald Trump actually dismantled NATO, I think he would really be J.D. Pondon. I don't think he would know. I would no longer say that sarcastically or in a joking manner. I would truly believe that he is the Manchurian candidate. I think he'd also be, I was going to say, I think he'd get assassinated before he does that, but I feel like the CIA has no motion any longer. You can say Trump is not saying the quiet part. You can't say Trump is not saying the quiet part out loud and still wanting American hegemony. He's just favoring Putin for his private profit, presumably. The softer approach was only possible because of the previous horrific hard approach. Since they already had the colonial apparatus, all they had to do was throw crumbs in the open while stealing the bread under the table. The facade seems to be waning in the moment. Anyway, let's get back to this.
Zelensky refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls. He's claiming that President Zelensky has about a 4% rating. Polls suggest it's 57%. He goes on, the only thing he was good at was
new. Trump administration orders Pentagon a plan for sweeping budget cuts, slashing 8% from the defense budget in each of the next 5 years, per memo obtained by Washington Post. Unlike USA, DOD has a massive budget, $850 billion a year, and is backed by powerful lobbyists and lawmakers. Yeah, I think that if they were to demand that the DOD cut 8% of the military budget, do you know where I think the proposed cuts would actually come from? VA, housing, and all of the other things that are supposed to take care of the veterans once they're already, bruised and broken. I don't think that they would actually be like, oh yeah, we got to cut 8% of the budget from, procurement strategies and acquisition, weapons acquisition. That's not happening. There's always room for budget cuts when it comes to healthcare, okay? Never forget.
Was playing Biden like a fiddle. He then calls President Zelensky a dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he is not going to have a country left. He goes on, in the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end.
U.S.-Russia talks include discussions on withdrawing U.S. troops from NATO countries that joined after 1990, security sources say. Bro, I that would be insane. I don't think that that's happening, okay? Holy shit. I also don't understand how Donald Trump gets to do that. Like, why does Donald Trump get to do that? Why does he get to do that? And his fans still think he's like the GOAT and loves America. But when I say NATO should withdraw, I get treated like a hostile enemy combatant. That is one thing I'm very jealous about. Like, Republicans can literally advocate for fucking universal healthcare if they wanted to, and people will be like, yeah, that's great. Bro is making predictions again. Oh no. He views it from an economical sense. Why are we protecting them? I don't understand. Does he just not have a conversation with like any lobbyist that's just like, hey, dumbass, it's that permanent military presence is good for us, Each individual troop has to get trained, and each individual troop has to get American weapons. And also their military is purchasing American weapons. Like, does he not understand that from an economical sense, this is what it is? Like, this is what the reason for NATO is in general. Maybe Donald Trump did listen to the Tucker Carlson interview with Putin and was like, no, we should make Russia our next Israel. They're much nicer to me. That's crazy.
End to the war with Russia, something all admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden never tried, he claims. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. President Trump goes on, I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered and millions have unnecessarily died. And so it continues. He also calls Volodymyr Zelensky a moderately successful comedian, talking America into spending billions of dollars to go into a war that couldn't be won. He says the US has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed, while the US will get nothing back. Well, all of this happening now as a number of discussions continue about the future of Ukraine, some of them without Ukraine involved. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin has delivered a pretty positive verdict on Tuesday's talks between the US and Russia. Those are the talks that took place in Saudi Arabia, saying he rates them highly. Speaking to reporters earlier, Mr. Putin said the purpose of that meeting was to increase trust. He said he is happy to meet President Trump, and there has been some indication in Moscow today it could even be as early as this month. He says he expects Ukraine will take part in talks at some point.
Yes, I have been informed. I rate them highly. There are results. The first thing I would like to say is that we have agreed to resume the normal work of diplomatic agencies. The constant expulsion of diplomats from Washington and Moscow does not lead to anything good. If this goes on, only cleaners will work in these buildings, whose work should be also appreciated. But this is not what diplomatic missions are created for.
Well, Ukraine's leader, President Volodymyr Zelensky, had earlier said President Trump was living in a bubble of Russian disinformation. Ukraine was excluded from those talks in Saudi Arabia between America and Russian officials.
5-foot Putin law? How do people respect him in his country? What do you mean, bro? He's a bad motherfucker. Let's be real. Also, I think Zelensky's short too, isn't he?
And here is President Zelensky speaking earlier.
Since we are talking about 4%, we have seen this disinformation. We understand that it is coming from Russia. We understand and we have evidence that these numbers are being discussed between America and Russia. It is unfortunate that President Trump, and with great respect for him as the leader of the American people who constantly support us, unfortunately lives in this disinformation space.
Joining me now, our correspondent Nomia Iqbal, who's in Washington, and also to Vitaly Shevchenko from BBC Monitoring, who's been following Putin's remarks. But first to Nomia. Nomia, one of my guests earlier was saying that we have to pay.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. 17 categories were exempted in Hexet by Hexet in his request, including border security operations, one-way attack drones, and missile defense. Bro, there's no way. There is no way we're actually demanding DOD cuts from cuts from avenues where there is a lot of money to be made, okay, for the military industrial complex.
Pay attention to what President Trump does rather than what he says, but there does seem to be a war of words at the moment, and certainly looking at those latest comments on his Truth Social platform. What's your analysis of what he said?
Well, yeah, I think that's not, entirely incorrect. It's what he does, not what he says. But what he says is hugely significant. Do remember he's in his last term.
Don't you think that anything that could end the killing could be done? Hundreds of thousands of deaths is insane and not worth losing land. Wait, what? No, I don't disagree with talking to Vladimir Putin on principle. I don't disagree with implementing a ceasefire at all. I have no issues with this. This is what I said the Biden administration should have done time and time again. They chose not to do so, knowing full well that they could potentially lose power and then get Donald Trump to be the responsible party for what the terms and conditions look like. Okay? I also am admitting that Donald Trump is simply optically doing something that is messed up. But technically what he is doing in terms of directly going to Russia and cutting Ukraine out of the conversation is not even remotely surprising. That was always the reality, right? The idea that Ukrainian autonomy in this process plays a significant role is a lie told by American media every step of the way. That's all that it was. That's all that it ever was. Italy is considering a withdrawal, apparently, with a recommendation for NATO to return to its 1997 borders. Am I wrong at this take? This is also the fault of the EU leaders only just waking up now and just being reactive. EU also dragged its feet in letting Ukraine into EU, not that it would have stopped Putin from invading. How do you know this and still blame Russia? Because at the end of the day, Russia still invaded Ukraine and gave America an endless amount of opportunity. Okay? Like, even from the perspective, even if you were thinking like, oh, I'm pro-Russia or whatever, it's still a major mistake. What are you talking about? Look at the pipelines. They're blown up. Your entry point into the EU marketplace for energy is gone. America literally shut that shit down and is now forcibly selling its own natural gas to the EU, being like, hey, you can't trust these guys. You have to trust us instead. What are you talking about? 2 countries join NATO. Ultimately, it's not that significant. They're not like exactly massive militaries or whatever, but still, they had a neutrality, like a handshake neutrality agreement, and now they're a part of NATO. The neutrality is cast aside. Virtually everyone that is under the umbrella of the American, virtually every nation all around the world that is under the American security blanket now is terrified, truly terrified. They're truly terrified of like global instability because they see Vladimir Putin as a spoiler, as someone who is basically ruining the bounty and the seeming peace in the first world that American hegemony has brought forward. All of that is great for the United States of America. We're so far removed from the consequences, and we get to reap the rewards. OMG, you sound so brain dead. And who did that? The U.S. blew them up. OMG, you sound so brain dead. This is just straightforward what has happened thus far. I'm not giving you speculation. I'm just explaining to you who gets to win the most in this process. Like, it might come across like a victory to many of you that are in the camp of like America unconditionally, right? That you might look at this and be like, well, Vladimir Putin actually set out to undermine American hegemony and succeeded. Okay, but at what cost? And in that process, he's brought about a wave. He's accelerated the wave of right-wing reactionaries and nationalists that have been able to take advantage of the inflationary crisis and the instability caused in this moment to gain more momentum, gain more popularity. If you think that this is good for the planet, if you think that all of this stuff is going to be good for the future of this planet, you're wrong.
In office. But look, I don't think anyone was under the illusion that things were going to be under President Trump as they were under President Biden when it comes to Ukraine. His comments are still pretty extraordinary. They're very long, but the fact that it's important to sort of first of all stress that Kyiv last held an election in 2019.
Wait, so you're not pro-Russia, Sag? Yeah. Shocked to find out that I'm not pro Vladimir Putin.
Has been unable to stage another one since Russia's invasion in early 2022. But saying he's a dictator without elections is quite extraordinary, because I don't think that those are words he'd necessarily use about the Russian President Vladimir Putin. In fact, I think that's something that has stood out with Donald Trump again. It was similar to his first term. He seems to criticize everyone but Putin. I mean, last week, Mr. Trump had accused President Joe Biden of starting the war in Ukraine. He wants to have this closer alignment to Russia. I think there was always an expectation that he was going to say something. He's in Miami at the moment on a business meeting, but it's...
I'm a longtime follower of yours, but I hate this take about retreating NATO troops from Eastern Europe. You do realize many of us live here, right? You Americans made us so dependent on your troops being here in the face of an imperialist Russia. You can't just now and throw us to the wolves without a plan to guarantee our safety. That should have been done a long time ago. Not now with the Russian threat looming. No, I understand that. I just don't think it's going to happen. I still don't think it's going to happen. And if it did, I would be shocked. Like, you know how we talk about, at the end of the day, you know how we talk about like, Russia will never, move past the positions, or won't be able to physically move past the positions that they've already acquired in Ukrainian territory and like go into Poland or whatever. You fucking retreat troops. I don't know. That's a very different dynamic. And I match up my expectations of world powers or regional powers with what their track record looks like. If you were to say this about China, I would have a different opinion. Russia is not China. Okay? Russia has shown time and time again that it does have, just like Turkey, but Turkey does it under the auspices of NATO, so no one really makes a big stink about it in the Western world. But Russia, as a foreign adversary, behaves in a similar fashion to how Turkey behaves in terms of like its own regional politics. As in, they are not shy about using hostile military incursions. Okay? Or as a regional power, they're not shy about destabilization, using the ethnic Russian groups that already exist within these countries to say like, oh, we have a real liberatory reason for being here. We have an emancipatory reason for being here. That is certainly something that Russia is not shy about doing. So who knows? Literally, if they invaded a NATO country, it's World War III with nukes. No, I know. I'm saying, I know. I'm saying that, let's say they remove NATO presence. Let's say they disband NATO and remove NATO presence from Poland. Like, does Russia go in? I don't know. I don't know if they have the capabilities, but that's a very different dynamic at that point. I just don't think that, especially post the invasion of Ukraine, I don't think that it's appropriate for me to say, no, Russia would just handle things with economic influence. What do you mean? I don't know. Obviously not as NATO. No, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Russia is not fighting NATO. No, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm saying that they disband NATO. If they hypothetically disbanded NATO, you're mishearing the point I'm making. Obviously not currently. Why do people not hear the words that are coming out of my mouth? Oh my God. Oh my God. NATO isn't disbanding. Might be. I just tuned in. No, I was talking about the hypothetical that is being presented right now by Donald Trump. I don't think that NATO is being disbanded either. I'm simply stating, what the NATO is disbanding? I just tuned in. You, Hasan.
It's not particularly helpful considering he's got his special envoy to Ukraine, Mr. Kellogg, in the country right now, holding talks.
Because you're talking roundabout, overcomplicated ways? No, I'm not. What are you talking about? It's not a roundabout or overcomplicated way. What are you talking about in roundabout ways? It's fucking simple. Russia is killing, invading, and lying about killing and invading and destabilizing the whole world. They literally POTUS and effectively the U.S. Yes, dude, they're invading and destabilizing and lying about it in the entire world. What are you talking about? All right, let's continue.
With Mr. Zelensky.
Yes, Keith Kellogg, who says his mission there is to listen to Ukraine's concerns. So a bit of a mismatch between that and what President Trump is saying. What sort of reaction are you getting there in the US? Probably not to these latest comments. They've only just happened. But what kind of reaction are you seeing there in the US, especially among Republican politicians, to the way President Trump is handling this?
Well, the aid that has been sent to Ukraine so far was passed by Congress, so there is bipartisan support for helping Ukraine. There will certainly be Republicans who are uneasy with what Donald Trump is saying, but in terms of them actually saying anything publicly is probably going to be a bit of a stretch. The party is incredibly loyal to Donald Trump, even more so now. Democrats, on the other hand, of course, they very different. They have been alarmed by what Mr. Trump said in regards to blaming Mr. Zelensky for the war. Senator Chris Murphy for Connecticut, he serves on the Foreign Relations Committee. He said, I'm going to quote what he said, he accused the president of lying to the American people, of essentially rewriting history. As I mentioned, Mr. Trump last week even accused President Biden of starting the war. But I think something that is probably important to add here is that, foreign policy aside, and if you add the domestic angle in, Donald Trump campaigned on the promise to end the war in Ukraine. Just recently, I spent a bit of time in Pennsylvania. It's a swing state that Donald Trump won last year. And for a lot of the voters that I spoke to, those who were for Trump, those who were against, there was some overlap in terms of Ukraine, most of them saying that they didn't think that the US should continue being involved in Ukraine. So Donald Trump, as far as he's concerned, he's delivering on a campaign promise. But of course, this reset of relations with Moscow, the concern for Ukraine and Europe is that it might come at a huge cost for Ukraine.
Why do our EU allies turn on us so quickly when we have been giving them so much money? The second we decide to stop giving our money away, dude, are you crazy? What are you talking about? What are you? Do you believe Trump? Like, what do you mean? What do you think we've done to the EU? If I were to rank who's getting f***ed over, like who's getting f***ed over the most, okay? At the tippy top of this list is Ukraine. Following closely is every country in Europe, the European marketplace in general. Okay? Then it's Russia. Then it's America making out like a bandit. And the only country that actually benefits the most from both Trump's actions and also everything else that's going on is China. Okay? America doesn't simply give money to other countries with no expectations. We don't give money to countries because we want to help them. Okay? The Marshall Plan wasn't simply to rebuild our allies. Okay? We do that because we wanted to create this massive web of control and security cooperations with 800 military bases around the planet. And we very clearly utilized that during the Cold War. Okay? What do you think happened? Post-World War II, immediately, we just redirected all of our efforts against the real enemy. Okay? And we used Nazis in the process to attack our real enemy, the USSR, the influence of communism and socialism. And after the past 3 decades of complete dominance and neoliberalism, it's basically becoming a self-inflicted wound at this point as contradictions worsen, as our parasitic owners of capital demand more and more profit year over year. It's getting to a point where it's becoming unsustainable due to the successes that America had. It's getting to the point where it's unsustainable due to the success of capitalism. Because capitalism, if left to its own devices, is inevitably going to collapse no matter what. It was great in terms of moving America and the rest of the planet into the industrial world. Okay. It was certainly an advancement in comparison to feudalism. Okay. For sure. Make no mistake. Liberalism brought a lot more social prosperity. If you are inside of the countries that were able to benefit from it, okay? Countries outside of the periphery, of course, were consistently dominated, and they rarely got to see the bounties of liberalism and whatnot. But without any sort of ideological opposition, capitalism is destined to fail. And we're here. We're there right now. And when capitalism is in crisis, as it was in the 20s and 30s as well, fascism is seen by capital owners as a way to restore order and to make sure that we continue maintaining the pre-existing hierarchical constructs. Rich people at the top, the rest at the bottom, toiling away endlessly. A whole nothing burger will come out of this. Chill out. Yeah, look. The nothing ever happens, guys. Still hold on to this idea that it's a more annoying way of doing the Fukuyama like history, the end of history memes. Okay, it's just like a modernized version of that. Things are always happening. It's just not happening to you directly. Okay, because the entire system is designed in a way that is supposed to make you feel like nothing bad ever happens to you. And in many respects, in comparison to someone living in Iraq, yeah, things are not happening to you directly. But the reality of the matter is, even Fukuyama recognizes that things are happening and that he was wrong for saying history is over. Why are American leftists like this? I don't think this person is a leftist. There are plenty of people that come into this community, plenty of liberals that come into this community as well. 100% of nothing ever happens, guys, are comfy Dordashian mommy boys whose lives are too good. Okay, that's kind of me too, to be fair. But also, at the same time, I am not a nothing ever happens guy. At least I do recognize that things are happening all the time at a rapid clip. But I am also a Dordashian mama's boy.
Okay, Nomiya, thank you very much. Let's bring in Vitaly Shevchenko from BBC Monitoring. Vitaly, looking at what President Trump has just said, what he's been saying in recent days, and what President Putin has been saying, are you seeing any kind of mirroring in the language of the two men?
Well, Anita, it's so tempting to speak about what's going on, what they're saying in superlatives and epithets. It's truly extraordinary. The Russian and American positions on Ukraine specifically, they're almost perfectly aligned. First, we heard from Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, say that NATO membership for Ukraine ruled out, getting territories back ruled out. And now Donald Trump is saying that Volodymyr Zelensky is a dictator. He lost his mandate and Ukraine started the war. Well, my job is to monitor the Russian media, and that's what they've been saying for years. And it's truly extraordinary to hear that come from Donald Trump. Now, there are opinions and there are also facts. Of course, we can argue about how successful or otherwise Volodymyr Zelensky was as a comedian, but in terms of his popularity, the opinion polls that I've seen, credible opinion polls from Ukraine, they suggest that his approval ratings, Volodymyr Zelensky, he enjoys a slightly bigger approval rating than Donald Trump in America. And in terms of elections, Ukrainian law specifically forbids holding presidential, parliamentary, local elections at a time of war. So these remarks, they will come as a shock to many Ukrainians who also, well, they'll have a huge issue with Donald Trump saying, well, it's Ukraine that started the war. In terms of how you row back from these remarks, it's really difficult to imagine an easy way of doing that. And it's beginning to look like Ukraine is losing or has lost America as an ally. And what Donald Trump has been saying for days suggests that, well, he's much friendlier towards Vladimir Putin than he is towards Volodymyr Zelensky.
Briefly, Vitaly, what is the Russian media saying in response to all of this? Give us a sense of that.
Oh, they're overjoyed. They are saying that this is very good news for us. They haven't really embraced Donald Trump as a friend. They're saying that he still has America's interests at his heart, but he's clearly driving a wedge right into the heart of the Western alliance. And one commentator on Russia's Channel 1 says, it works for us.
Vitaly, thank you very much. Vitaly Shevchenko and